Okay, thank you very much and welcome to today's session, which is on the IGCSE in English, Specification B. This course is designed really for people who are new to this specification, but you are all very welcome if you are already teaching. We're going to pop, hopefully, the link to the resources into the chat, so you'll be able to download those. So Specification B is an international GCSE. So just so that we all know how to use the chat facility, I can just ask you to pop into the chat box, where in the world are you joining us from today? So for me in London, it's morning, but it may be around the world a different time of day for you. So if you could just pop that into the chat box, please. Okay, morning Cyprus, Barcelona, Pakistan, Jordan, Bangladesh, Philippines, Myanmar, France, Ghana. Oh, we're a very worldwide population this morning. Poland, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. Okay, you're all very welcome. So as I said, we do have a lot of downloads for you today, and I'll be referring to these as we go through the training this morning, or wherever you are, afternoon, evening. So we've got the specification, which is SO2, the sample assessment materials, which is SO3. Touching the Void lesson plan is SO4. We've got something on transferable skills for you, SO5. We've got some course planners, which are SO6 and SO7. And a scheme of work, which is SO8. Question paper, SO9. Mark scheme, SO10. And a delegate booklet, which is SO11. Today's session is very much about content and planning. We've got another session on Thursday, which is going to be much more about assessment. So that's the plan. So in terms of our agenda today, the kind of things we're looking at, as I said, are going to be content and planning, a little bit on assessment and mark schemes, and some stuff on support resources and an opportunity for you to ask questions. So what do we hope to achieve today? Well, we're looking at identifying how the qualifications are devised, what is in each question, what's being assessed where. So we're going to look at the content of the qualification. We're going to think a little bit about planning and lessons. There will be the opportunity for you to share good practice. Okay, I'm just going to ask Ellie if you would mind just popping the hyperlink to the resources into the chat for everyone. That would be great. We're going to look at the assessment of the qualification, how to prepare students. We'll be looking at some tips around that. And then we're going to finish off with some support slides. So that's where we're going, really. So, as I said, you're all very welcome. If you're new to Pearson, you're all very welcome to us as an awarding body. We are the UK's largest awarding body. We go back over 150 years. This is just a little bit of background about the awarding body. But I always find it amazing how many qualifications we run, how many countries we're involved in. We're over 70 countries around the world. We mark over 9 million scripts a year, which is just for an English teacher, they're just statistics that are quite astounding, aren't they? So this is quite an interactive session. There will be times for you to share good practice or anything you want to ask, and there are other delegates in the room who have been teaching the specification for a while. So the specification, as I said, is in the download. I'm hoping the hyperlink is around there somewhere. We're going to be referring now a little bit to SO2, which is the specification, and this content is from that. So The content develops skills to analyze a range of literary fiction and non-fiction texts, to develop skills of imaginative and transactional writing for a variety of purposes and audiences. And then we've got on that content slide, that third bullet point with the asterisk, develop speaking and listening skills. Now, the spoken language endorsement is optional.
Literally, like, what an awful, awful day.
Okay, can I just ask delegates if they wouldn't mind muting if you've got your mic on? That would be great. Otherwise, it gives a little bit of feedback. So the spoken language endorsement is optional. It appears for candidates on the front of their certificate as either a pass, merit, or distinction. So assessment objectives and skills. There are 3 reading assessment objectives, AO1, AO2, AO3, which I'll be talking about more as we go through the training today. And they cover the understanding of text, critical analysis, and comparison. And then there are 2 writing assessment objectives that cover content and accuracy. And that 1 spoken language objective if you're doing the endorsement. And the structure of the assessment, there's 1 3-hour written paper. There's no set or pre-release text, so it's very much a test of skill. There's unseen source material. There are 2 pieces of that that are used in the exam. There are 3 sections of the exam paper, A, B, and C, and they're differently weighted. So section A is 40% of the final grade, section B is 30%, and section C is 30%. We'll be looking at all of that in a little while. So we'll look at the skills in each section as we go. As I said, this training is about the skills, really, of those assessment objectives, where they're assessed and so on. So section A requires students to understand and interpret 2 unseen texts, show understanding of how writers use language, and compare those 2 texts that they haven't seen before. Section B requires students to use both reading and writing abilities to produce a piece of directed writing based on the text that they've read. And section C allows students to develop their own writing, either creatively or imaginatively, or to produce a coherent argument. So we'll be seeing how that looks as we go through. So a little bit about using the specification and sample assessment materials. In the delegate download, we have got the latest edition of the specification and the sample assessment materials. The specification is obviously the key document that you'll need to be very familiar with before you start teaching, because that's got the content, the assessment, the core objectives of the course. The sample assessment materials, we call them SAMs for short, are also very important. They're the first set of assessments written by the awarding body, and those are the things that go through Ofqual, the regulator, before any live assessments are taken. So those are in your download pack, SO2 and SO3. So in this exam, in specification B, students are faced with 2 previously unseen texts. They're very readable texts. Those of you already teaching it, they're very enjoyable texts, but students haven't seen them before. So it can be quite a challenging part of the exam for students, reading those 2 texts for the first time. They have to show that they understand the text for the short answer questions, but they also need to be able to compare the writer's ideas and perspectives for the comparison question. So a lot of the teaching around this is to build student confidence and help them to tackle unseen text. And we'll be looking at how we might do that as we go through. They also need to have the confidence to trust their own interpretation of a text, as well as recognizing and supplying the evidence to support their interpretation. Okay, thanks for that comment, Stella. Just bear with me a moment. I'm just going to send the moderator a quick message and ask if she can just share that. Thinking about unseen text, this information is from the specification. We're told that text types studied should include a range of forms such as fiction, journalism, for example, articles, reviews, speeches, journals, and reference book extracts. Text types should also include literary non-fiction text, such as sections from autobiographies, letters, obituaries, and travel writing, and texts that are essentially transient, such as instant news feeds and advertisements, will not form part of the assessment. Lovely, thank you very much, Ellie. So anybody who hasn't got the resources, we have got the hyperlink there for you in the chat. So hopefully you can now have access to everything. So that's great. So thinking about where you can find unseen text. So obviously you can look at past papers. These provide you with text from past examination series. And remember, of course, that for the International Specification B, we have 2 papers in each sitting. We have the main paper and the paper we call the R paper. And if you're not familiar with that, the R just stands for regional, and it's just the paper that people take on a different time zone. So obviously the text for the main paper and the R paper are different in each series. So there's a wealth of resources there for you. The home GCSE that carries the title 1EN, the course code, that also has a number of anthologies. It's got unseen extracts, websites, the Times Educational Supplement, Bite Size, Teach It, Teachwire, English Biz, all have teacher-created resources. So I'm just going to stop talking for a moment, and any resources that you might use in your own teaching that are good for finding unseen text, I'm just going to give you a minute to pop those into the chat. So any resources, any good tips you've got for other delegates, if you could pop those in, please. Lovely, thank you very much. Thanks, Mark. That's a good. I haven't actually come across that one, so I should be looking at that later. Any other good tips for finding resources for the unseen? Thank you. You coming in there? We really want our students to develop dynamic reading skills. So, questioning and challenging texts that they're reading, making connections, predicting, envisaging, speculating, play with the ideas, keeping their options open as they read. That's, really those are the skills for these 2 unseen texts in specification B. So thinking about different ways of reading text. So we've got all those ideas down the left-hand side: predicting, skimming, scanning, close reading, questioning, backwards, forwards, empathizing, visualizing, inferring, And of course, inference is something that they really need to be able to do. And if you're teaching English literature as well, of course, that's definitely a skill that they'll need. So, what's going on in the text, really kind of getting in and being able to move around that text is going to be really, really helpful for your students. Looking for key information, asking questions of the text, all of those things, making connections. So, of course, you might have other ideas as well. You can always pop them in the chat as we go through, just to be as interactive and sharing of good practice as is possible. So, Barbara Blyman from the English and Media Centre suggests that we often start from the wrong point when we're asking students to interrogate text. Instead of what's your response and why, we tend to think about other considerations. So we might be looking at language and structure features. We might be looking at what's the key information. And one of her suggestions is that lower down the school, we might begin with these 4 simple questions. What are my first thoughts? Am I puzzled or intrigued by anything in the text? What do I like about it? Does it remind me of anything? So we're going to have a go at this now. So we're thinking about using images now to help read text, to help us interpret text. So we're going to look at an image. We've got those 4 questions at the bottom. And I'm just going to mute for a moment and get you to have a go at this. So what are your first thoughts? Are you puzzled, intrigued? What do you like? You're reading the image. So just give it a go and pop your ideas into the chat. Great ideas coming in there. There is, of course, no right or wrong answer here. We're just interpreting an image. We can see that we're making some judgments. Yeah. Okay, some great idea there about contrast, rich and poor, lack of empathy, rainy, normal day. Wouldn't like to be outside on such a day. No, no, very much so. It is a little bit like that day where I live at the moment. Okay, so we can see how we can interpret text through images and kind of getting students to make those inferences perhaps lower down in the school will be a useful skill as they come up the school ready to tackle this specification B. So here's another one for you. What do you think's happening in this one? What textual clues? Where would you find it? Who is it for? So have a little go at that one just for a minute or two. Great, thank you very much for those ideas coming in there. Um, yeah, so this is going to be interesting. It's actually part of a campaign about modern slavery, and there's a hyperlink there. This a21.org, so you don't need to be able to click on it, but a21.org is just a useful website for images that will help you. I know you can see how this can be replicated in the classroom, that you can show a small bit of the image um, or a small bit of text and then reveal that there is a different interpretation possibly within that. So it's just a useful way in, if you like, to help our students be text detectives. So how does that help students to read text? Obviously, students these days are surrounded by images. They see them constantly on their phones and on televisions and so on. And they're very confident with reading images and short films. And by introducing text, you can encourage students to notice details, to explore ideas linked to the details, to analyze meaning, to evaluate effectiveness. Lots of the ideas you were coming up, particularly for that last one, would be great things, obviously, to discuss in a classroom. So another way to approach unseen text is to show short extracts of text, any text, and ask students to state what they're about, as well as trying to understand why some of them are more effective than others. So this is just a very simple example. Which would you support, the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and why? So have a little think about that. This helps students obviously look at tone. Tone is often a discriminator. A student who can identify and discuss tone is usually a very good student, but we can encourage that skill. So which of these two, left or right, and why? So again, I'll just mute for a moment. Lots of people preferring the left-hand side here. So here we have 2 slides now with examples of short extracts with some questions. These kind of questions using these short extracts help students to understand, think about text type, think about purpose and audience, and to think about the language that the writer has chosen. So this one is about Urquhart Castle. And we can think about the kind of text it is, the purpose of the text, who is it aimed at, what's the audience, what's the purpose, what's the audience, what do you notice about the language? So Urquhart Castle is probably one of the most picturesquely situated castles in the Scottish Highlands. Located 16 miles southwest of Inverness, the castle, one of the largest in Scotland, overlooks much of Loch Ness. Visitors come to stroll through the ruins of the 13th century castle because Urquhart has earned the reputation of being one of the best spots for sighting Loch Ness's most famous inhabitant. No, there isn't a castle. It's just text. So we looked at images for the first couple. Now we're looking at text. Yeah, tourists. Yeah, lots of use of adjectives. So we're thinking about audience, statistics. Yeah, we've got lots of things. Travel writing. So we're thinking about text type. We're thinking about audience and purpose. Okay, so here's another one. Then we're going to move on to AO2. So this is just kind of getting us warmed up, getting us in the zone of kind of thinking about text type, audience, purpose, and you can see how it would work with your students. So again, who is this aimed at? What's the purpose? What kind of text is it? What do you notice about the language? So this is from a Jeffrey Archer book called Something for Nothing. Jake began to dial the numbers slowly, as he had done every evening at 6 o'clock ever since his father had passed away. For the next 15 minutes, he settled back to listen to what his mother had done that day. Okay, yeah, well, yeah. So you can see immediately the difference. You can see how this would be such a good teaching tool about audience, purpose, tone, text type, all of those things. Yeah, story, it's narrative. Well, and we could talk about Cat. What do we learn about Jake? What do we, lots going on there. So thinking about AO2, we'll look at the assessment objectives in a bit more detail later. But AO2 is the analytical assessment objective, the analysis of language and structure. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it is just a helpful summary of the types of things students might be looking for when they get to the AO2 questions. So we've got a list of language features, word choices, the figurative language, the word classes. Some of these you were picking up when we were looking at the little extracts there. Facts and statistics, rhetorical devices, tone, anecdotes, so on. And then we've got as I said, this isn't exhaustive, but we've got some examples of structure, such as sentence types, punctuation, connectives, shifts, that whole shift and zooming and so on. Aisha, if you just scroll a bit further up, you'll find that there's a hyperlink to all of the resources that helps. Repetition and so on. So thinking about some useful phrases that students can use when they're responding to particularly to these AO2 questions, which we'll look at in a minute. Here are some useful phrases that they'll be able to use. So teaching phrases like this and openers can help students to formulate responses and keep them really focused on the question. So things like the evidence that supports this is evident when, this is apparent when, this is illustrated when, demonstrated by, and then that's the kind of when they're using a quotation. And then for explanations, this suggests that, infers that, implies, insinuates, shows. We can see that some of those obviously are synonyms for the same thing, just to give a bit of variety in that analysis response. So those are some useful tips for the AO2. And moving on to the AO3, which is our comparison assessment objective. We're thinking here about approaches to comparison, and I'm sure some of you are already teaching this. So anything that you find helpful in teaching comparison, can you pop that into the chat while I'm going through this? That would be really helpful if we share that good practice. So we're encouraging students here to think about drawing links between the text, these two unseen texts, So we're thinking about narrative voice, content, themes, ideas and perspectives, language and structure, tone, setting, purpose, formats, all of those things. They have to use evidence from both texts, words, phrases of comparison, contrast, all those discourse markers that I'm sure you teach, in contrast and comparison, similarly, all of those kind of things. So I'm just going to ask you to think about how you would approach teaching comparison, how you encourage your students to compare. We all know about voice and tone and perspective. How do you teach it? Okay, thanks for that. The question there, Stella, about what's the best layout for comparison. Obviously, students who start to compare immediately tend to do better. Okay, now we've got some teaching tips coming in, so that's great. I like that, Margaret. I might well use that myself. Thank you. Any other suggestions for teaching the comparative elements of this paper? And obviously, in Thursday's session, we'll be looking at exemplars. I'm just thinking there's another question. Okay, so there is a question there about whether or not they should be comparing titles, themes, and then focus on one text and then the other. Generally speaking, students who compare throughout do better because it keeps them much more focused on the task. Whereas sometimes if they're looking at one text followed by the other, they tend to become a bit narrative and talk about what happens in the text and then try and draw it together. And that tends to take more time. And this is, of course, a very demanding paper because they're writing for 3 hours. But when you see some examples in Thursday's session, module 2, where we're looking specifically at a question paper and responses to that, I think you'll find that would help. Yeah, Amanda, that's okay. So some really good things coming into the chat now. Okay. So thinking now about sections B and C, which are the writing sections, there are 50 marks allocated to writing. Students are required to write one piece of transactional writing based on the unseen text as part of section B, one piece of imaginative personal writing as part of section C. Students obviously need to be aware of the different forms of writing and ways in which they can engage the reader. So again, we've got an opportunity to think about good practice here. So how do you teach writing? How do you do that? I know that here in the UK, a lot of schools now have started doing these writing workshops. Maybe, it's just a lesson every couple of weeks. It's just dedicated to free writing. They have a different book and, just write something about something they want to write about. But do you spend enough time teaching? These are just some reflective questions. So any sharing of good practice in here would be great before we move on. It's perfect with writing. Indeed, they do need to practice, don't they? And sometimes maybe we're focused very much on the skills for the other questions at the expense of writing. That could be something that you might want to think about. So we're going to look at some of the things we need to encourage students to talk about. Audience, purpose, language, tone, format, using evidence from both texts, of course, in section B of the question paper, and using their own words. So we're going to unpack this a little bit now by looking at audience and tone, levels of formality, and so on. So when we're thinking about audience, as we were a little bit earlier when we were looking at some of those little extracts, who is it aimed at? Who would read it? And we're thinking here about reading and writing, of course. So it's always important to think about the audience and who's going to be reading your piece. So who's it aimed at? Who should read it? Thinking about appropriate vocabulary, sentence types, length, appropriate content, register. Yeah, levels of formality should be lively, interesting, all of those things. Always thinking about the audience. So what about tone? So thinking here about the writer's attitude to the subject and the audience and how they're conveyed through diction, syntax, levels of formality, use of literary rhetorical techniques. Because tone, of course, is a higher order skill, especially when reading unseen text, but also when writing effectively, maintaining a student maintaining their tone as they go through. So identifying the tone in the unseen extracts, keeping their tone in their own writing, it's a real skill that does need teaching. So we're going to have a little think now about levels of formality. And we've got some sentences here, 5 sentences, and we're going to try and put these into a scale ranging from formal to informal. This is a little interactive bit. There is perhaps a bit of negotiation in 2 of them, but it's just a fun activity. You can use this in the classroom. What order would you put those in terms of level of formality? So I'm just going to mute for a minute while you have a go. And if you could pop that into the text chat. Okay, so some of you have put 5, 3, 1, 4, 2. Some of you have put, I would say there might be some discussion around 2 and 4, but that discussion, of course, is really good for the classroom. So I think my answer would probably be 5, 3, 1, 4, 2. It might be 5, 3, 1, 2, 4. So yeah, that's just an interesting little activity that that you can do with your students. We're going to move on now to thinking a little bit about planning and the importance of planning. And we'll come back to this again when we look at exemplars. But in terms of the assessment objective 4, one of the two writing assessment objectives, which is about communication, it's very important that the students plan. They know where they're going. So obviously you want an introduction, a main part, and a conclusion. But how do you encourage your students to plan? And what do you do? So, again, a little opportunity here for the sharing of good practice on planning. I can encourage you as I'm going through the next slide, perhaps, to share anything you use to help students plan. So obviously planning an answer should take no more than 5 to 10 minutes. It's not a draft. It's not a draft of their entire response. It's got to answer the question. Got to focus on the key words of the question. Got to plan the use of time, and using a rich and varied vocabulary. So thinking about what makes an effective plan, what different types of plan could students use? So again, yeah, thanks very much for sharing. It's always good to see the good practice coming in. And some of these ideas on the next slide, we have already got in the group. There's some great ideas coming in there, but of course, mind mapping, brainstorming, listing, select from their best ideas, using one of the exemplars that you'll find in all of the past examiner reports, writing frames, lots of ideas there that you can use to plan. So we're going to think now about using different scenarios, because as with reading, these are just some ideas to encourage students to kind of make their skills a little bit more precise, perhaps. So I've got images here of 4 fridges, and we're thinking about who eats from these fridges. So as with reading, these are just some ideas to encourage students to improve their skills. So thinking about using images and asking for adjectives, asking for a name, asking for dialogue to go with these. Thinking about which fridge do you fancy? Which one would you want to eat from? What's your reaction to these? I'm feeling a bit sad for that fridge on the far left, or the person that needs to go shopping, maybe. So, it's just an approach that you can use in the classroom. Yeah, yeah, Aisha, that's a nice, nice question. And then, of course, you can use tools like this, that the students go back over their writing, and this will help with their AO5, that part of the technical aspects of their language. Looking back over their writing and scoring themselves. What of these have they used? It's just a little self-assessment tool there. So that's a little bit about skills. So thinking now about lesson plans. So there are some lesson plans on the website. There is a lesson plan in your pack, SO4 in that download pack. So let's put some of these ideas that we've been looking at together. So we've had great ideas shared in the chat this morning, or this afternoon, or wherever you are in the world. I keep saying this morning because it is morning for me. About content, how to teach, thinking about leaving enough time to cover all of the course, and especially if you're doing the literature, the 4ET as well. So thinking about your teaching time, about, are you teaching the language and the literature? How much time do you need to leave for revision? When are you building in mocks and tests? Thinking about all those things, of course, when you're putting it together. So this is just an example that is in your download pack. This is one of the planners that's in that pack. So we've got two planners for you. They're SO6 and SO7. And you might just want to have a little glance at them now. So this is thinking about it and approaching it in terms of the reading skills, the AO1, the AO2, the AO3. The AO3 is the comparison, the AO2 is the analysis. The writing skills, AO4 and AO5. Then the reading and writing skills, and the section C and the revision, this particular top level plan. So in the download pack, we've got those SO6, SO7. Might want to have a quick look. And any thoughts? Those of you already teaching, how do you plan the course? So again, here a minute or two just to for those of you already teaching the 4EB, just to share any good practice. Aisha, if you scroll back up through the chat, you'll find the hyperlink to the download pack. So any good practice about planning? Again, I'll just mute for a moment. Hi, Aisha. I'll just get the moderator to share that again for you. Aisha, that should be there for you now. Okay, so I'm just going to leave it on mute for a minute while we share some good practice in terms of planning and approaching the course, and then we'll go on to talking about assessment. So just a minute more. So moving on to assessment and the exams, just a reminder here that some great ideas coming into the chat, so keep an eye on that, everyone, as well. So section A, the questions are related to previously unseen extracts. They assess students' understanding of and response to the stimulus material, those two extracts. Section B is one 30-mark directed writing task based on the ideas presented in the source text involving a given audience, form and purpose. It assesses students' ability to write according to the guidelines in response to the stimulus material that they're given on the day. And section C is one 30-mark writing task from a choice of three. So discursive, narrative, and descriptive, and those will always appear there. So the total number of marks for 4EB is 100, and the duration of the assessment is a 1 3-hour paper. So thinking about the reading assessment objectives, there are three: AO1, AO2, AO3, which we've touched on already. AO1 is read and understand a variety of texts, selecting and interpreting information, ideas, and perspectives. And that's 15% of the final assessment. AO2 is understand and analyze how writers use linguistic and structural devices to achieve their effects. And that's 20% of the final assessment. And AO3 is the comparative assessment objective. Explore links and connections between writers' ideas and perspectives, as well as how they are conveyed. And that's 15% of the final grade. So we can see that reading is 50% in total of the qualification. Then the writing assessment objectives are AO4 and AO5. AO4 is communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, and register of writing for specific purposes and audiences. And that's 32% of the final grade. And AO5, which is write clearly using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures with appropriate paragraphing and accurate spelling, punctuation, and grammar. And that's 18%. So that writing is also 50%, reading and writing 50% each of the final grade. So where are these assessed within the paper? So section A of the paper, questions 1, 2, 4, and 5 are assessment objective 1. Those are the short comprehension style questions that we'll be looking much more at question papers in Thursday's session. Section A, questions 3 and 6, those mirror each other. They're the AO2 questions, question 3 on text 1 and question 6 on text 2. Question 7 is the comparative assessment objective. So that's section A of the paper. Section B of the paper, question 8, assesses AO1, AO4 and AO5. And section C of the paper, which is questions 9, 10 or 11, just assess writing AO4 and AO5. So that is how the assessment is put together. So in terms of timing, and again, we're going to have some sharing of good practice here. We get a lot of questions from teachers about how students manage their time in this paper, and there is no right or wrong or suggested approach because it will very much depend on the type of student you're teaching. Some teachers look at the number of raw marks, so there are 100 marks for this paper, and the amount of time available, 3 hours, and they advise those students that way. And others look at each text and the questions and split the time that way. So just a moment now to think about how do you advise your students, if you're already teaching this paper, to approach it. So talk about your approach to helping students using their time well. We've got 3 hours, 2 unseen texts, 9 questions in total, 7 reading, 1 reading and writing and 1 writing. 3 sections, 100 raw marks. So 40, 30, 30. No right or wrong answers, just an opportunity for you to just share how you do this. And I'll mute for a moment. Lots of great ideas coming in here for people to read into the chat. A few differences of opinion, but there is no right answer. It all depends on your students. So walking, talking mocks. These are very popular here in the UK. I don't know whether they're popular internationally, but it's a really good way of helping your students to go through a paper. This is a very long paper. So the idea of these is that students sit in the exam room. Hopefully the exam room where they'll be sitting the actual paper, hopefully in the same seats if that's at all possible. They're given an exam paper, might be an old paper, if possible the whole writing booklet so they know how to work their way around the sections, and they're literally talked through every question on the paper. So for example, when they get to question 3, they're told to look at text 1, they're reminded of what the skills are, and so on. They're just led through the sessions, through the smallest steps, underlining the key words, which questions to plan, things to remember, and so on. And then they write their responses to that question in time and conditions. Of course, the hope there is that when they get into the real exam, they remember that walkthrough. They were sitting in that seat, they remember how that went. So that's just a tip of something that's proved very popular here. Okay, so in terms of section A, we're now going to be thinking about the paper. We're going to be thinking about the question paper that's in your download pack. So this is SO9 on your download for today. This is the 2019 paper. I'll just give you a moment just to make sure you've got a question paper there in front of you. So the first two questions on each text, so that's question 1 and question 2 on text 1, and questions 4 and 5 on text 2, are simple retrieval questions. They focus just on AO1. The third question on each of the texts, so question 3 and question 6, focus on AO2, and they require the student to give a more detailed response, exploring how the writer uses language and structure to achieve their effect. Question 7 requires students to compare the two texts. That's the AO3 question. It allows students to make relevant and cogent connections and contrasts of the ways that the writer presents their ideas and perspective. So, questions 1, 2, 4, 5, retrieval questions. Then we're looking at questions 3 and 6. So if you're looking at the question paper, we can see that in the 2019 question paper, the AO2 questions were as follows. So question 3 was explain how the writer presents the achievements of the students taking part in the Break City Academy sailing programme. You should explore your answer with close reference to the passage, including brief quotations. So, the mark tariff is cranked up there. They're on 10 marks for each of these questions, but we can see how they mirror each other. Question 3 is on text 1 of that question paper. Question 6 is on text 2 of that question paper. So explain how the writer persuades the reader to consider trying after-school activities. You should support your answer with close reference to the passage, including brief quotations. So we can see how students are being clearly signposted here to the assessment objectives. So it's the same skill, just using the two different extracts. So in terms of the mark scheme, what are we looking at here? Okay, thanks for that question. Yes, we often get this question about how many points do students need to make. And unfortunately, there isn't an answer to that. It depends on the quality of their response. So if we look at the assessment objectives, we've only got 3 levels here. We haven't put levels 1 and 2 on the slide because it would make it too busy, if you like, for us to be able to read. But if we look at this, there are 2 bullet points in each level. The first bullet point is on the level of the analysis. So we can see here in level 3, we've got clear understanding and explanations of language and structure and how they're used by the writer. So clear understanding and explanation. Then when we move up to level 4, we're looking at thorough understanding and exploration. Now this will all become a lot clearer on Thursday, but we are going to look at one level 5 achievement today, but we'll be looking at more levels on Thursday. And then in level 5, we're looking at perceptive understanding and analysis, and how these are used to achieve effect. So it moves up clear and explanation, thorough and exploration, perceptive and real analysis. And then the second bullet point on the mark scheme is to do with how the references are used. And so they're appropriate and relevant in level 3. They're detailed and appropriate, and they fully support the points in level 4. And they're discriminating and they clarify the points in level 5. So I can't say to you, if they make 2 points, that they'll get it, or if they make 3 points, they'll get it, because it's a levels-based mark scheme. So it depends whether they're showing clear understanding and explanation, thorough understanding, or perceptive understanding. So in terms of just helping you think about this, and this isn't, today is much more about content and planning, but Thursday is much more about assessment. But we do have one for you to look at today. This is the second paragraph of page 1 in SO11 in that download pack. It's an extract from a response that got 9 out of 10. So I'll just give you a minute to have a little look at that. This one got, as I said, 9 out of 10. You'll be able to see here that there is some perceptive understanding and analysis. There are some discriminating references, but occasionally it's a little bit descriptive. So this is just an extract, it's not the whole response. Just going to give you a minute to read through that. So I will mute for a moment. Many apologies. It is on Wednesday, not on Thursday. Apologies. I'm doing literature on Thursday. That's misleading you there. So module 2 is Wednesday. Okay, so moving on now. Hopefully you've had a chance to thanks for that question, Mark. Obviously, we are encouraging our students to write well. This particular question, of course, assesses reading. So they're not going to, there will be no negative marking for them doing that, but obviously Rather they didn't, wouldn't they? Okay, so question 7, we're moving now to assessment objective 3. So just a reminder, question 1 and 2 are retrieval for extract 1. Question 3 is AO2 analysis on extract 1. Questions 4 and 5 are retrieval on extract 2. Question 6 is analysis on extract 2. And now we're moving to comparison. So now students are working with both extracts. So refer to both text 1 and text 2 to answer the following question. Compare how the writers of text 1 and 2 present ideas and perspectives about after-study activities. Support your answer with examples from both texts. So very clear signposting to what students are expected to do here. And again, we're using a levelled mark scheme. And we haven't got level 1 here for the same reason that we can't fit them all on the slide. But bullet point 1 is always about the consideration of the comparison. Okay, yeah, I think I have answered that question, but if you missed the answer to that, there is not a certain number of points that students make. It's about whether they fit the descriptors in the levels-based mark scheme. So we gave you an example there of perceptive for a level 5. In module 2, we'll be giving you other examples from levels 3 and 4 as well to show how they meet the demands of those descriptors. So there is no, you must write 3 or 4, make 3 or 4 points. It just doesn't work like that, I'm afraid. It is just, what kind of analysis are you doing on that AO2? Okay, so looking at the mark scheme for the AO3, the consideration of comparisons, and again, AO3, like the AO2 question, we can't say you need to make X number of comparisons. It's whether or not you fit these into the where they fit in the mark scheme. So in level 2, it's obvious comparisons. In level 3, it's a range of comparisons. In level 4, it's a wide range of comparisons. And in level 5, it's a varied and comprehensive range of comparisons. Bullet point 2, in each of these levels, is about how students are approaching the ideas and perspectives of the writer, which will include theme, language, and or structure. So if they're commenting, they're in level 2. If they're explaining, they're in level 3. You'll see these words are coming up from the AO2 as well. In level 4, they're exploring. And in level 5, they're analysing. And the third bullet point in each of the levels is always about the selection of references. So in level 2, they're valid. In level 3, they're appropriate and relevant. In level 4, they're balanced across the text and they fully support the points. And in level 5, they're balanced, they're discriminating, they're fully supporting. And we can see there that there's a bar at the top of level 2. They can't move above that if they're not comparing in their response to this question. So again, we've got an example for you. This one again is in SO11, so I'll give you a minute to have a little look at that. This is a response that achieved 4 marks. So this is a 15 out of 15. So I'll give you a moment to have a look at that. So hopefully you've had a chance to skim through that response. So we're moving now from section A to section B questions. So this is designed to test the candidate's ability to use relevant information from the unseen text used in response to section A and to present it for a given audience and a given purpose for the section B question. They'll be asked to use a recognised form of writing, such as a speech or talk, a letter, a magazine article, website contribution. Stella, thanks for that question. That was a top mark response. That was a 15 out of 15 question. Okay. Responses for section B are assessed on the relevance of the information, the sense of audience and purpose, and the quality and accuracy of expression. And there is no choice of question for section B. So the 2019 question paper for question 8, section B, was write a letter to your local newspaper explaining why you think there should be more opportunities for after-school activities in your local community. And students then have a scaffolded question that says, you should include the reasons why there are not enough activities, the types of activities that could be offered, the benefits of after-school activities. Think carefully about the purpose of your letter and the audience for whom it is intended. So again, it's very much focused on the demands of the mark scheme. So there are 3 mark schemes in play, if you like, for this question 8, because we're looking at AO1, AO4, and AO5. So we're just displaying here the top of each of these mark schemes. So AO1 is marked out of 10, AO4 is marked out of 12, and AO5 is marked out of 8 for this question. And you can see here how these work. So I'll just give you a moment while I take a sip of water, because I've done a lot of talking, for you to just have a quick look at those before we go on to look at a response. But of course, you do have a copy of the mark scheme in the download pack as well. So we can see here how that level 5 relates to AO1. We can see how the second little bit of mark scheme on the screen there is about AO4. It's about communication. And we can see how the AO5 mark is about the technical accuracy. So again, in your pack, in SO11, we've got a response. This is the start of it. It looks like this. We've got the relevant bits of the mark scheme up there on the right-hand side. I'm going to mute and allow you to have a read through of that. And I'll actually pop the scores this one got into the chat so that you've got it there. Just a minute or two to have a read through that. So hopefully you enjoyed reading through that one. You can see how this candidate has used the extracts to inform what they're writing and how they've met those assessment objectives. So very nice response there for section B. So we're going to move on now to the section C questions, where only writing is assessed. So there is they're not being asked to use the text here.
Yes.
So the requirements of section C: students have the opportunity to be personal and creative and write in an interesting manner. They should aim to write with varied vocabulary and fluency and from an individual perspective. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to take your question. Again, Stella, you know, there isn't a number that we can attach to range and wide range. When we look at responses in module 2, we'll be able to see how that works when we've got a range of responses to look at in that delegate pack. So for section C, the students have a choice. There are 3 titles there for them, and they can choose which of those best fit their skills really on the day. The essays could be narrative, descriptive, personal, argumentative, or discursive. There may be opportunities to respond personally and imaginatively to the themes presented in the reading text. So that is where the link between the earlier sections of the question paper and section C come in, but it is not appropriate to copy for them or to use the key ideas from them. So that's where they might not want to use, you know, it can be a springboard, but they're not expected to use the content of those extracts. So for the 2019 question paper, these were the questions. Students are told to write approximately 400 words on one of the following. And these were the choices. There will always be a choice of 3 questions. So students only ever choose one. So the questions here were either you have to work hard to get what you want. To what extent do you agree with this? Or write a story, true or imaginary, entitled The Prize. Or describe a time when you learned something new. So no audience is specified. Candidates should write for the examiner, and any justifiable methods of communication will be awarded. Question 9, candidates are free to agree or disagree with the statements and may present a variety of arguments. For question 10, candidates may interpret the title as they wish. They will be rewarded for such qualities as a sense of drama, vivid description, excitement, or suspense. And for question 11, candidates should be rewarded for their powers to evoke a place using effective vocabulary, for example, from the senses or descriptions of natural scenery. So now we're going to look at a response. This is a response to the question 11. Again, it's in your download pack. I'm going to give you a few minutes. This is a very sharply focused response. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to read it in full. So I'll be on mute for maybe, let's have a look, maybe 4 minutes, while you have a look at that response. It looks like this. So I'm going to be on mute and allow you some time to look through this. Okay, there were a couple of questions that came in there while you were having a read about, which I'll just answer for you. I'm not sure if it's May or Mason, but if I can answer your question first. You're talking about peel chains, and you are talking about the AO3 comparison question there, I think. Certainly that will work. Make sure that they are, of course, comparing. But unfortunately, your question about how many is, as I said earlier, it really depends on the quality in relation to the mark scheme. So there is no correlation between the number they do and the mark that they will receive there, I'm afraid. And the next question, Nancy, yes, apparently you will be sent a link to the recording. So I think that question came up earlier as well. In answer, Stella, to your question about how many marks did the student get, they got a mark of 18 out of 20, so into level 5, and 10 out of 10 at the top of level 5 for this question. So it's, as you can see, it's sharply focused. There is some perception and subtlety in there. There's a sophisticated use of form. And if we're thinking about why was it not 20 out of 20, why was it 18? If we're thinking about the tone and the register, they're perhaps more effective than sophisticated. So on balance, for the AO4 there, it got 18 out of 20. Okay, few questions. Rathan, yes, I am trying to answer the questions as they come into the chat. You don't download some, it will be sent to you. Can I ask if it's response descriptive task or narrative task? It reads more like a story. This is a response to question 11, which was describe a time when you learnt something new. And they've yeah, so this candidate has interpreted it obviously in their own way here. Okay, so we're moving on again now. Obviously, we're going to be looking at scripts in a lot of detail and looking at assessment in a lot of detail in Wednesday. And apologies that I said Thursday earlier. Thursday is the literature module. No, that's absolutely fine. Okay, so in terms of support, and you might have seen these support slides before, but we are supporting you every step of the way. There is the Getting Started guide. Now, if you're completely new to Specification B, I would really recommend that to you. It is available for download from the Pearson website. We've got training events that are face-to-face or online. Sometimes we do training events in our regions that you were joining from today, and there are online events as well. I'm going to be talking about the subject advisor in a little while. The scheme of work is in your download pack. The skills mapping is also available for download. Sample assessment materials are in your download pack. Examiner reports. Now, these are reports that are written after every series for both the main paper and the R paper. They contain exemplars of responses at various levels. And they also contain examiner tips, obviously, which can be passed on to your students. Very, very useful documents, and they're very full and detailed documents. So examiner reports, exemplar marked responses within those, past papers are all available for download from the Pearson website, apart from the latest one, which is under a padlock, which you are able to access. but your students are not able to access because you might want to use them, obviously, for their mock exams. Exam Wizard I'll be talking about. Mark schemes are all available for download. Results Plus I'll be talking about, and access to script service, which if you're already teaching this, you'll know about. Are there teacher guides for the English language and literature student books? I actually don't know the answer to that, Nancy, but you could ask the subject advisor of that question, which I'll share their details with you in a moment. So this is what the landing page looks like. And you can see there that there's sample and specification sample assessment materials is this page. There are 120 pieces, and these are constantly being updated, of course. The exam materials and teaching and learning materials are all there for you to look at. So you can expand each of those areas to look at more, and you'll see there things like the Getting Started guide are in there. So Results Plus, if you're already teaching the specification, you'll have been using that, I'm sure. It's an analysis tool. So you can look at all kinds of things. You can look at classes against classes in your schools. You can look at your school against other schools in your region. You can identify, your students doing better on one question than on another. Are they doing less well on questions 3 and 6 and better on the comparison question 7, or the other way around? And you can kind of tailor your teaching to meet what your results are suggesting. Boys or girls doing better. It's all those kind of things. So you can sign up for a free account. It's very easy to do that. There are various little videos and things as well that will show you how to use those tools. You get those kind of mean, median, and all those kind of little top hats on graphs and things in Results Plus. So it's a very useful tool for teachers. We also have for you, of course, Exam Wizard. So that's a free tool for you. You can make quick homework assignments. This is the first place where you'll find the question papers and mark schemes for the latest series, the examiner report that will offer you all the insights, of course. And you can make things from there. You can make your own question papers from there. So it stops students looking at whatever they can access online and guessing which one you're going to use for the mock. So it's a platform for you to use. Access to script. Now this is an online portal. It means that on results day, on the GCSE results day, either in January or in August for this specification B, you can immediately see your students' answers. So it makes everything very transparent. You can just see exactly what they've written. And so if they ask you, is my mark correct? You can go in and you can look, and provided they've given you permission to do that, you do have to have student permission to do that, but it's a free service. You can go in, you can look, and you can say, yep, that is a fair mark. Or you can say, well, actually, maybe you need a review of the marking here. But it's transparent. You can see exactly what they've written for every student on results day. I think we're the only awarding body that gives you that access to scripts on results day. We've been doing it for some years now, I think since 2017 or something like that. So that's just for you to use, and it's a very helpful tool. So we do have resources available for you, curriculum matched student books and active books. You do not have to use these. There are plenty of other teaching resources that you can use. It's just to say that this student book is available for you, but there are plenty of other places that we've identified a bit earlier on in today's session, where you can find things, and some of you were talking about Twinkle and other resources that you use. So it is available, but you don't have to have it. Okay, if you have any questions following today's training, then Claire Haviland, many of you will know Claire. Claire is our subject advisor. She is the advisor for all things English, so the home GCSE, the International Specification A language, this qualification, the International Specification B, the 4ET, International GCSE English Literature, the International A-level, the IAL in either language or literature, and the home A-level. So any questions, you've got her email address there. You've got her Twitter feed, which will tell you what she's reading. It's always very, very interesting. I would advise you to sign up for her regular updates, because that will tell you everything that is new. And you can also book an appointment with her. Now, I can see that there are some questions that have come in here, so I'm just going to scroll up and try and answer some of those. Yes, number of chains, we can't say, you know, 4 chains equals level X in the mark scheme. It really is about the quality of what they write for questions 3, 6, and 7. And that will be much clearer when we look at responses in different levels in module 2 of this training. These are all about reading and writing, aren't they? I just want to make sure if there will be a system of exam like for all 4 skills, and each day for each skill later. I'm not too sure what you mean by that question. What we've done today is we've basically done a walkthrough of the assessment objectives. So the first half was about thinking about the skills that we're teaching. We've looked at the assessment objectives, AO 1, 2, and 3, the reading assessment objectives, and AOs 4 and 5, the writing assessment objectives. So those are the skills. So those assessment objectives are all in this specification question paper. There is only one question paper here. And then if in your region you're doing the spoken language endorsement, so the speaking assessment objective, there is plenty on the website that will support you with that. I hope that's answered that question. If it hasn't, just please pop something else in the chat there, and I will try and answer it. Yep, it looks like I've answered your question. Okay, that's great. So yeah, all the reading and writing assessment objectives we've covered today. Wednesday's training is much more about looking at samples, and you'll have a chance to have a go at marking those samples, and we'll be exemplifying different levels for these questions. So today is very much the introductory look at content and what's being assessed. Okay, so are there any other questions you'd like to ask me today? Please feel free to pop them into the chat box. It has been a very, very full session. I would like to thank all of you for sharing of good practice. You've put some excellent ideas in here. You've been very active in the chat. I hope I've obviously running the PowerPoint and taking the questions as well. It's quite full on. I hope I've answered all your questions. If I haven't, Claire is there, or there's Wednesday's session where you're very welcome to ask more questions. So if there are no further questions coming in, I'm going to pass back to Ellie, our moderator, to conclude today's session. So thank you very much for all of your hard work and all of your questions and all of your activity in the chat.